wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking all about childbirth. As we're on the fertility journey, obviously our end goal is to have our baby. And then when we are pregnant, I want you to be empowered and have the knowledge you need to be able to advocate for yourself when you are ready to deliver. From selecting your doctor, from selecting the labor and delivery team, being able to navigate the hospital setting if you choose a hospital birth, if you're looking for home birth. I'm so excited for you to listen to today's episode on how to be your own advocate and when you're ready to deliver your child. Excited for you to listen. Let's go. Hey, Gina, excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. I'm excited for today.
Awesome. If you could share with us how you came to do this work.
I wish I had an exciting story for you, but literally, it was my first job out of law school. I just stumbled on it because what I do, I'm a childbirth attorney. And just for your audience, for those of you who may not know what exactly that is, basically during the birth of a child, if something goes wrong, whether it's a mistake or complication and baby's not born healthy, or I've had babies pass during childbirth. In some sad cases, I've had moms pass during childbirth. So then I'm the attorney that comes in and finds out what went wrong, why, but more importantly, what should have been done. Baby would have been born healthy, mom born alive. But yeah, they don't teach you about this area of law or medicine in law school, high school, college. I've never heard about it. So I got my first case February 2003, and I just gotten married. Having a baby was on my radar. I get my first case in, and I'm like, what? Things go wrong, like really wrong from mistakes. And not only that, I looked around. I remember we had a meeting that day, our team did, when I was hired in, and there was 20 of us. Actually, there was over 20 of us. And that's all we did were the baby cases, the mistakes, the complications. That's it. That was what we did. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I got into it. Obviously, it's a hard it's a hard profession to be in emotionally, just because of what you're dealing with on a day in and day out basis. But I stayed with it. I've always liked it. Let's see, that takes us to basically 20 something years later. I decided to write a book. The book is called A Parent's Guide to a Safer Childbirth. So basically, what I'm trying to do is get in, instead of getting involved in the aftermath of something going wrong during childbirth, I'm trying to get involved before childbirth in hopes that parents can have a healthy baby and avoid these mistakes and complications that I've seen over the years.
Yeah, I think I know a lot has changed since I had my children. So my daughter's 22, my son's 19, and now everyone's getting a doula and a midwife. And I know before I went to have my daughter, I was like panicking and thinking I need to learn the breathing techniques. And then that went out the window when I hit the hospital. They had to do the epidural, and I was in there for 18 hours pushing, and then she had to have come up with forceps. And I both had
Oh,
C-sections,
geez.
and yeah, both of my kids would. So they said I had a C-section with the first one, and I had to have one with the second one, which now we know is not the case. And a lot of and we have this birth plan, all these things. And obviously, people listening to this podcast, right? We're helping people that are on the fertility journey, and the end result is to have your baby. So I wanted to bring you on and really talk about an empowering approach to this, and really from your lessons learned through some tough things that you've had to witness and be part of. How does someone take an empowering approach to this, being able to put together a plan, and what are some things that, like, your top things that they would need to look out for as they plan the birth of their child?
Excellent question. Lesson one is preparing for childbirth. And that's a lesson really from the families, because the families in my cases come to the hospital and they're not ready. They're not prepared for childbirth. And it's so sad because on the day I have to talk to them, which is definitely by far the hardest part of my job, it seems like they know so much more in the aftermath of something going wrong. I think there's this mentality a little bit, we're all guilty of it. Bad things only happen to other people. And unfortunately, that leaves you in a very vulnerable state, basically on one of the biggest days of your life if you're not ready. And as a childbirth attorney, I would not recommend that. So that would be like lesson one. There's obviously a little more to it. If you're prepared, that will help streamline communication with your delivery team. They don't have to explain every little thing and whatnot. So what I did then was chapter two of the book are the important important facts, or I don't even call them facts, like the foundation of labor and delivery that I find to be very important as a childbirth attorney. These are the things that I rely on when I'm looking at a case, trying to figure out what happened, what went wrong, what should have been done. Sometimes I do, because of what I've done for so long, I do get the calls from labor and delivery from people. And again, this is what I rely on when I'm talking to somebody. It's very important. But another lesson that is absolutely huge are the common facts and issues in a legal baby case. And that is though that's just incredibly important, because this is not, I've been on podcasts and they're like, why is this information just surfacing? And I'm like, I don't think a childbirth attorney ever thought to write a book about what we know and what we've seen in our cases. But anyway, I give the top 10 issues and facts. And if parents know these issues and facts, it'll give them a heightened sense of awareness. So it'll help them make those good decisions, know that these are important decisions. And like we talked about just a second ago, for instance, the number one most common fact in a legal baby case is Pitocin. Pitocin is a drug that is used to induce mom's labor. It makes mom's uterus contract, and then mom will just eventually go into labor from there. But that drug is in almost every one of my baby cases. So that's important. And actually, that's one of the lessons in and of itself. So I wrote the very last chapter in the book is how to have a safe Pitocin induction. Because while Pitocin scares me as a baby lawyer, doctors are fine with it. And you may be given that option. Given what I've seen over the last 20 something years and all the research I've done on the drug and what I've seen in the cases, I wrote that chapter in hopes that families now can have a safer Pitocin induction if that's the method that they choose.
Sorry, yeah. What are you seeing with the Pitocin? Yeah, I remember I was induced too. It was like 4 days early. And you just go in there and you just like are blindly trusting the team. And so it's not to say that these people don't know what they're doing, but it is to be not blindly trusting someone, being empowered beforehand. So then you can start to make some decisions. So let's talk about the Pitocin thing. And then what about the midwife? Like where are you seeing that more? But let's talk about this first, like as far as induction, what are you seeing there of the risks?
Yeah. So basically, Pitocin, doctors agree that it's okay to use in labor. But I think that might be really the only thing that they agree on. So everybody seems to be, they administer Pitocin differently. Different doctors, different nurses, different hospital systems have different ways that they'll administer Pitocin. As a baby lawyer, I like Pitocin basically slow and steady and let it hit your sweet spot. It's the times where Pitocin it just keeps increasing too fast, and it puts your body goes on overdrive, and it starts to affect the baby. And then it's important to understand that Pitocin it's considered a high alert medication. And there's only a hand, I think maybe, I don't know, it's in the book, 10, 12 high alert medications, and Pitocin's one of them. And that's because when it's administered incorrectly, it can have very, very bad things can happen to mom or baby. So it can be a very dangerous drug if it's not administered correctly.
And so you're seeing people like, what are you seeing there? What are some of the cases that happen with someone that that it wasn't administered properly? Like you're seeing what maternal baby death, like what are you seeing?
Yeah, babies will get too stressed. So you have to realize when mom's uterus contracts, it's like squeezing down on the baby. So every time there's a contraction, it's like the oxygen cuts off from the baby. This is completely normal, no reason to panic. Okay. I've had doctors explain it to me, and I think it's how I explained it in the book. It's if you have a contraction, it's like basically going underwater until the contraction releases. It's the same thing. The problem with Pitocin is those are like artificial contractions. It's like a synthetic drug. Your body has natural oxytocin levels, and that if you were to go into labor naturally, it would be like your natural oxytocin that jumpstarts your labor. So Pitocin's like a synthetic drug. It's just making your body contract. And if you increase it too much or too fast, then you don't give your body time to respond to it. Then all of a sudden, like, bam, you're having all these contractions. Baby can't keep up. So then sometimes babies may crash, I've seen mom's uterus literally like tear open. And that's very dangerous for mom and baby. But it's more so babies getting into trouble, basically just from too many contractions. Goes right down to lack of oxygen.
And what's something else that you see then as far as something to look out for?
Probably w- another important thing, and you're right about the doulas and the midwives becoming more popular. Or I wrote in chapter 7 of my book is having a baby advocate. And literally, baby advocate can be your husband, it can be your mom, it can be your best friend, it can be just somebody who has a second set of eyes on you and baby. And that really stems from, because another common thing I see in these cases is a very busy labor and delivery unit. So the units get busy because babies come when they want to come. This is not scheduled. So then all of a sudden, you have delivery teams that are running hard, they're running thin. So having somebody else have, again, eyes on baby, you as mom focus on, what you need to do to mentally and physically deliver baby is huge. Once you get into labor and delivery, if you're not relaxed, you're going to delay everything. So if you can look at your husband and give him the nod, like, I need this, or I don't like my nurse, go swap those out. And by the way, I do love labor and delivery nurses. Most are great, but there are some that are not. And if you get one of those, you need to be able to be ready to look at the husband and give him the look, and he can swap them out. So yeah, that's huge. But a busy labor and delivery unit is that can be scary because you may not be getting the attention that you need. I do tell about a very in general case that had happened at the hospital where basically mom came in to deliver her baby. They started the fetal monitor and there were some concerns about the baby. So they did some testing and intervention, and overall, the delivery team was reassured that baby was going to be okay at that point in time. So they left mom's room to go help the other patients. While they left mom's room, the baby's heart rate stopped graphing. The heart rate during labor, and again, this is all in my book, is extremely important because baby's inside you. So it's not like a doctor can assess mom. A doctor can look at mom and say, oh, okay, you're in a bunch of pain. You don't feel good. You don't look good. They can't do that with baby. So the best way to tell if baby's doing okay is their heart rate. So if there's concerns or whatnot, it's very important to keep the baby's heart rate going, because if something does happen to baby and or is happening to baby, you can tell by looking at their heart rate. Anyway, back to the case. The delivery team leaves the room, the heart rate is graphing, but right after they leave, the baby's heart rate stops graphing. In the room, the family's in there, the grandparents are in there. It was mom's first baby. And after some time, the nurse comes back to the room and they're like, oh, the baby's heart rate stopped graphing. And they go to try to fix the fetal monitor and they can't get the baby's heart rate back. So they call a doctor who wheels in a big ultrasound machine and he confirms that basically that the baby had passed away while they were helping other patients. It's devastating. I mean, they were right there.
Yeah, that's to have that doula or midwife present on that, right? Someone can be your advocate, or if it is going to be your partner, but to have, and I think it's good to hire that out because really the partners, he's experiencing the same thing, along with the mother. So he might not even be able to, you know, he could be having his own journey. So it's to hire that piece out, to have someone be your advocate, so then you don't have to worry about that stuff where someone's going to be getting someone to help in there and making sure everything's fine. And what about
Yeah,
if pardon?
I like your stance on that. I agree with finding a good doula. And because also you build a relationship with them ahead
Right.
of time. And then they also, or a midwife too, and then they speak the language of the delivery team. So they are really great advocates if you've got a good one.
And then what about having a home birth? What have you seen? Any cases with, obviously there's a lot of stuff on the news saying that they like to demonize this, and you can only have your baby in the hospital. But meanwhile, for thousands of years, the babies have been born outside of this medical intervention side of things. And obviously the team can be there if needed, but then I think there's all this home birth and water. Like obviously that's a whole other episodes to do all kinds of podcasts on that. But what's your take on what you've seen there as far as anything to help people They want to have a home birth.
So yeah, so with my cases, we don't really have a lot of home birth cases. It's more hospital based cases that I've seen. But yes, okay, as a childbirth attorney and what I've seen for over 20 years, as that would be very hard for me because I can't unsee what I've seen. I can't unknow what I know. But for some families, all natural, that could be a great option, a beautiful option. But the important part about that is just picking a really good midwife and finding out what, like, under what circumstances is she going to, if there is an issue or a problem, get you to the hospital, or how are you going to get to the hospital? Who calls that? If you have a midwife that's hospitals are bad and we're probably not going to go, that's a huge red flag. You want a happy medium. You don't want somebody who's going to be like, let's go, or the opposite. But if you can find one that's happy medium, okay, we're going to assess you. And if I have concerns, then we're going to go. We're not going to take any chances. But that's probably the most important thing is just, and then having a really good midwife, doing your research on them too. And then I would always make sure that I've heard that the insurance is extremely expensive for midwives. So I'm not sure how many carry it, but I would prefer definitely if it was me or I would say if it was my children doing a home birth, that I would try to find one that was insured, but that might be hard to do.
What are some other mistakes or complications that people can look out for when they're preparing for their birth? Anything that's coming to mind there?
Yeah, your delivery team that day is so incredibly important. In my legal baby cases, it's their care that is at issue and analyzed more than any other aspect of the case. Since they are responsible for helping to bring your baby safely into this world, you need to make sure you have a good delivery team. Here's the catch. Typically, your delivery team is scheduled or are people that are scheduled to work that day. So when you get there, you got to assess your delivery team. Make sure you like them. How is your nurse? Is she irritated every single time you hit the call button? Does she come and check on you without you requesting? Especially if you're on Pitocin. If you're on Pitocin, you better have a good nurse. That is so incredibly important. Now, listen, I love my labor and delivery nurses. They are awesome, like I think I said before. But sometimes here, my book, I give the example. I have a case, and there was one nurse, she was born to be a labor and delivery nurse, 20 years under her belt. She's an amazing human. I have another nurse who I had so she's on labor and delivery working and the same shift. She had just gotten out of training, hated childbirth, and was looking for a new job. In that case, obviously, you don't have to try to work too hard to figure out whose care was at issue. Everybody that day at the hospital, I'm sure, knew that the new nurse hated her job and wanted. So if that patient would have said something, the other nurse would have stepped in or helped or switched out the other nurse because they already know.
Can you give us some tips on that now? Because a lot of it is we just think that people come in and we're like stuck with the people that are on the team. Meanwhile, there's things we can do to say, wait a minute, let's again, it's being our own advocate on this and not just, oh, I guess they know best. We know our body best. Obviously, these people on the team are trained, like they're trained people, but we have the right to say something. So how do you go about it?
Yeah, so let's say you don't like your nurse. Okay, so every hospital has a charge nurse. That's the nurse. She's obviously in like supervisory role, so she's usually more experienced, but she can you request the charge nurse. She'll come in and you just be like, "Hi, can I have a new nurse?" Again, I would suggest if you don't have a doula or something, looking at your husband and say, "Get me a new nurse." But if whatever, so whoever needs to say it, but just say, "Hey, I need a new nurse," and she's going to be on it. These hospital systems some of them are just huge. They're massive. It's not nurses hiring the nurses. The hospitals are hiring the nurses in. The ones on the floor, they know the good ones, they know the bad ones. So the charge nurse already knows. So she's going to be like, "Sure, sweetie," and she's going to swap out the nurse, and then that's it. And then you can then know you're in good hands because at that point, they're. I would hope they would give you one of the better nurses on the floor, but I'll tell you, most nurses I meet are amazing. But there are a few that I've met over the years that are like, ugh, I would have been requesting a new nurse. So
We work with a lot of people that are on the fertility journey that are in healthcare, from doctors and nurses, because it is an extremely stressful job, from 12-hour shifts and they go in being very compassionate people, and this system will just break them. And I see them
Yeah.
where they're, trying to have their baby, their own baby, and they're working in labor and delivery. And so it's like the stress of that job. And so you may coming in as this compassionate, caring, empathetic individual, and maybe the system just beat you down and you are exhausted. But then as the parent, as the mother or the parents coming in to have their baby, like to be able to be aware of that, have empathy for people obviously around you, but be able to request the person that feels like a better fit for you, and like actually thinking about that, because I don't think many of us do. Like this, oh, here's the team, fine. Oh, I don't like that
Right.
person. Okay, that's fine. Maybe I'm feeling, you second guess yourself, all this kind of thing. The whole medical gaslighting side of things is real anyways, but it is to be your own
Resident.
advocate.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
residents too. So residents are very common in my cases. Dude, these are doctors straight out of medical school that are in training and practicing on moms. And here's the deal with residents. So I'll meet with a resident. So these cases take years. A childbirth case is it's just years and years. So I'll have a case, the doctor was a resident, and then years later, the case is in full blown litigation, and I'll meet with the doctor. He's a third doctor now. And I'll be prepping him for a deposition or whatnot. And then the doctor who used to be a resident and is technically a resident on the case, they'll ask straight up. They'll be like, "Do I testify as to what I know now as a doctor, or do I testify as to what I knew as a resident?" And I'm always like, "Oh, I've gotten that question so many times over the last 20 years, I can't even tell you." And you have to understand that the residents are they're practicing on moms. Now, some of the residents, man, they're so competent and they're great. Others are like, oh my. So it's really important that if you have residents or whatnot, that you know how to deal with them too. But if you have a bad resident, I'd talk with the nurse first, even just your nurse, as long as assuming you like your nurse. So
I remember going for a pap smear and going there to do the little clamps and open things up. And I'm like, and there was a resident there doing the pap. And I'm like, that's the wrong hole, honey. And the doctor came in and she went, what's going on? I'm like, yeah, she's checking out my butt. So yeah, so she was like, okay, bye-bye. You go over here. I was like, oh, geez. So, but
oh my
they're learning.
goodness.
They're
Yeah.
learning anatomy.
No, they
Uh,
are. Really, like, they are all they do is go to school, and then they get out of school, and it's, "Here you go. Here's a real patient and real babies and real bodies, and good luck." These residents, man, they'll run the show. So, depending on what hospital it is, you gotta yeah, if you had I'd find out ahead of time if there's residents at the hospital where you're delivering, and if there are, talk to your doctor about their involvement and how, they handle the residents.
Pretty sure there's a stat on the third leading cause of death is actually mistakes in the hospital. So I know my husband was going in to get his knee surgery. I can't tell you how many people are like, okay, it's the left knee, and you signed the left knee. And then someone else asked about the left knee. So there's all these precautions in place because errors happen and people, it can be some pretty, yeah, grave consequences for these errors. And then that's why I think so many people in the healthcare profession are so stressed out, and then they end up finding functional medicine and changing their whole career because it's like it's just caught in a medical model that is just it's broken. Anything else? Okay, so what we want to question ahead of time, think about our plan. We want to, if we're not happy with the team, the labor, the team that's given to us, it is our prerogative to change that. Is there anything else then we need to watch out for? Unless any other
Your
top
doc
lesson learned?
Picking a good doctor. They head your delivery team. And when you pick your doctor, I feel like, and I'm guilty of this too, I have 3 kids, but you pick your doctor and it's more of your prenatal care with them. You're not really thinking of the big day that's so far, it's 9 months away. But I have analyzed OBGYN doctors for almost 21 years now. I have a whole doctor analysis that I do because these are doctors that you have to put in front of a jury. And a lot of times, doctors in these cases have very different opinions. So I'm constantly assessing doctors. Your doctor heads your delivery team. They're the ones that ultimately are making the recommendations to you. And as captain of the ship, they're ultimately responsible for bringing your baby, into this world healthy.
You want to share a couple of them with us? Just anything that's coming top of mind?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important questions is your OBGYN, that's obstetrics and gynecology. Those are 2 completely different areas of medicine. So when you're talking to your doctor, you want to be like, hey, what percentage of your practice is obstetrics, delivering babies, and obviously managing prenatal patients or patients prenatally? And what percentage of your practice is gynecology? Because listen, gynecology I mean, is way easier. It's more 9 to 5. Sometimes I think OBs, I'm like, do they think through what they're committing to when they become an OB? You're on call all the time. You have nights, you have weekends. It's hard. So I think what I've seen over the years is that the older doctors who really, and they put their time in, they've been in the trenches, start going more gynecology. Like, all right, I need a normal life. But who do you want delivering your baby? Do you want somebody who's in the trenches every day? This is what they're doing all the time, or somebody who's he's just dabbling in it. I think that is one of the most important questions I have in here. Like I just talked about residents, find out if there's residents that are going to be involved in your labor and delivery. A huge thing is how far away is your doctor from the hospital? Listen, I don't think I was just talking to somebody at the gym and they were so upset because their doctor didn't make it for wasn't there the whole time during labor and didn't make it for the birth of the baby. And I'm like, no, that's normal. I go, the doctor just no, the doctors don't come to the hospital unless they're on call. Now, sometimes you could get lucky and a doctor may be on call for 12 hours, and you're very lucky if that happens. But most of the time, your doctor is not at the hospital. So then they have to rely on the nurses or the residents to call them just at the right time so they can get their butt to the hospital and deliver your baby. And a lot of doctors, they don't make it. They're too far away. Or in Michigan, it's rush hour. Doctors get stuck in rush hour. You got to find out how far are you from the hospital.
Yeah, so I know my OB/GYN, she passed away at 60 because that woman, she was delivering babies nonstop and literally everybody loved her, but she just gave her life to this thing and on call and rushing all over the place. She wasn't eating a good diet. You saw that she like just like so much
Oh,
stress. And I'm like, oh, this poor woman that was at everyone's beck and call and such a great person. And I'm like, she died at 60. I'm like, and even I think it was like late 50s. I'm like, oh my goodness.
you really
So
was stressed out. Yeah. It's a
yeah.
very stressful job. But really quick, another really super important question is to ask your doctor is when you're in, because they are not there. And sometimes they have to then rely on who's at your bedside, which is whether it's your nurse or the resident or a midwife, whether they can review the baby's heart rate remotely. And they should be able to, because again, the heart rate's going to tell you how the baby is doing. I can look at a baby's heart rate as a non medical person and tell you if the baby's a rock star or if a baby's in trouble. Finishing up with the doctor thing. So, the other question, can they review the baby's heart rate remotely? Number one. Number two, if yes, will they do that without being called? So I have some doctors who will just continuously watch the baby's heart rate if they have a mom in labor. I like that because sometimes people interpret the heart rate differently. And then I have other doctors who won't even look at the baby's heart rate unless they're called. So that maybe if it's the middle of the night, I get it. They want to sleep or whatever. But personally, I prefer a doctor who's going to be pulling it up. But yeah, so back to the baby's heart rate. There are a couple things about that. So what's really important are there's three different types of monitors that will monitor the baby's heart rate. In chapter 8, I go over the different types of monitors. This is so important because when the wrong monitor has been used in the cases, and this is a common fact and this is a common issue, when the wrong monitor was used, the babies have passed away. So it's very important that you have an understanding of the monitors. And then in terms of reading the baby's heart rate, reading a baby's heart rate is not rocket science. But if you just know some basics about it, it will help you understand how your baby is doing. It'll help you be able to notify your team if they're running hard because the unit's busy. But just, and not only that, if there are concerns about the baby's heart rate, it's not concern for the baby's heart rate straight to C section. That usually doesn't happen. It's There's some concerns about the baby's heart rate, so we're going to do some testing and intervention, see if we can improve the heart rate. Like, it's a process, but it's a process that in my cases becomes extremely important. So if you have an understanding, a basic understanding of the baby's heart rate, as I have written in my book, you're going to be able to work more effectively with your delivery team in making decisions, and you're going to understand what they're saying. You're going to have an overall better relationship with them. So again, together you guys can make those super important decisions that will help bring your baby into this world healthy.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this has been super helpful. Well, I know it's been super helpful to be able to, it's all about empowering education for yourself and not just blindly trusting the doctors. It's you to get the team around you and go in with armed with some information, not like over researching and drive yourself crazy, but yeah, looking at this book. So it's going to have you as a manual. So they can get a free chapter. Where can they download that, Gina?
Oh, so again, chapter one, go to Gina Mundy, GinaMundy.com, and then go to expecting parents, and then you'll see chapter one right there. There's also the introduction of the book that I have up there, and it's why I wrote the book. And I think that's an important chapter too. So I have those two up there.
Great. So you can definitely check that out on GinaMundy.com. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.